Mom slid her arm out like a gate in front of the Christmas tree, the gold ribbon glinting in the morning light, and said, "No gifts for you because you're black?" My chest went tight. The room froze. Even the Nat King Cole from the Bluetooth speaker sounded like it skipped. "My name is Darnell. I'm 27 years old, and I need to tell you what my mother did to me. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I had to stand up in that church and in this living room, and why I signed a title in front of people who swore they would never see me as their own. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. A lie needs constant maintenance, like a bad engine, and hers had been knocking for years. She stood there in her cashmere and pearls, all white Christmas and white smile for the neighbors, and said it clearer than any whisper I'd ever lived under. That was the moment I reached for Grandma's study door, reached for the code she gave me in a voice that still warmed the cold corners of my life, and everything that came after was just water seeking the cracks. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The tree lights blinked. Siblings watched. Faces turned pale. I put my hand on the doorknob and I thought about the first time she lied in public and made everybody clap. We had us a church, Mount Victory Baptist over in southwest Atlanta, where the choir robes are white and blue and the altar call stretches long. At the Christmas charity banquet, standing under a banner about generosity, my mother took the mic and said, "We support our son Darnell $5,000 a month because family is family." Folks patted her on the back, dropped extra in the plate. Deacon Paul smiled at me like he was proud to see such a testament to love. I was bussing plates in a borrowed black vest, trying to keep my hands from shaking because that was the first time I heard the lie spoken like scripture. The applause hit my skin like cold rain. But that wasn't even the worst part. Truth is like water. It always finds the cracks, but mercy, it takes its time. Back then, I lived in a basement rental off Metropolitan. The window leaked cold, and the space heater buzzed like a mad wasp. I worked nights at the warehouse near Hapeville, breaking down pallets, scanning boxes, clocking out when the sun was getting up. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned shift by shift. I had a lower back that sang in protest, and the doctor said my A1C was flirting with the line, so he put me on metformin. On the kitchen counter, I had my medicine bottles, half filled because I was stretching them. On the fridge, a single magnet holding up a photo of Grandma's hands, kneading biscuit dough. I counted coins for Marta, quarters warm from my pocket, sometimes all the way down to the nickels. I stood in the dollar store counting out change for rice and a can of greens while my sister drove past in her new Mercedes, the one with the red brake calipers and the Louis Vuitton tote-riding shotgun, the car she bought after Mama told the church her boy was taken care of. I don't begrudge nobody a nice thing, but seeing that car when I didn't have enough for heat and medicine, my heart broke. Family is supposed to be a place to rest your bones. In our house, I was always a guest. They were white, all of them, and I was the black baby placed in their arms on a hot August day, a chance to show the city what open hearts look like. They loved the picture, they loved the praise, they loved the story as long as I stayed inside it like a prop. I heard jokes at Thanksgiving about our little affirmative action, and you know how his people are. I learned to laugh in the right places because survival has a sound. If only I'd known what she was really doing with the money folks thought was for me, I would have stopped laughing a long time ago. The first crack showed up in a cardboard box. Reggie, this brother I knew from the warehouse who did handyman gigs on the side, called me and said, "D, Miss Whitaker told me to haul some stuff out her garage. This box got your name on it." He pulled up outside my basement place and we carried it in together, our breath showing in the air because my heat was set low. Inside was an old white iPhone, the kind Grandma used to have. Cracked screen, dead as a stone. I charged it, heartbeat in my throat, and when it came back to life, the first voice memo hit me like a hug. I heard Grandma. "Baby, it's me. If you're listening, the code to the study safe is your birthday backwards. There's a letter for you." The room went soft round the edges. I replayed it 3 times. I went over there that night with the phone in my pocket and a hope I was scared to be seen holding. I asked Mama in the kitchen, "Can I see the study? I think there's something She smiled tight. We cleaned it out months ago. Her voice went corporate cool, the way she talked when the HOA called. When I pressed, she switched to that private tone, the one that shrank me down. Darnell, you're embarrassing yourself. You get confused sometimes. She said confused like I was fog walking. She said, no one will believe you over me. In the den, my brother snorted. Why you always bringing drama? My mother patted my arm like pity and whispered, you should be grateful for what you have. The church ladies in the nook stopped chewing. The room decided I was a problem. I swallowed the words and left, but my hand stayed on that phone like it held oxygen. That's when I knew I had to protect myself. A lie needs gas. I started following the fuel lines. I asked for a copy of the church benevolence ledger, said I wanted to donate and needed a receipt for my taxes. I ain't slick, but I ain't slow. The secretary at Mount Victory was kind. She handed me copies for the last 2 years, and every month there was a line item, Whitaker family, Darnell support, $3,000. Sometimes it was $5,000. 1 month, the Christmas when they took that extra collection, it was $8,000. I matched those dates against bank statements Reggie found in a pile he'd been told to haul to the dump. Transfers from MVBC Benevolence marched right into Elaine Whitaker's personal account. Meanwhile, on my best month, I had a $200 Zelle with a caption, "Don't spend it all at once." And most months, it was nothing but $50 and a lecture. I printed everything. I took pictures of my cracked window, the space heater, the empty fridge. I pulled down my old MARTA passes. The corners bent soft from the count. They said I was confused, but I remembered everything. I went through the legal papers. Kayla, my cousin on Mama's side, dropped off one afternoon. She looked spooked. She told me she was managing my college fund, she said, wringing her hands. Then senior year, nothing, not a penny, said it lost value. We sifted through a stack and found a photocopy of a codicil to Grandma's will. My name spelled Darnell. The loop on the L dragged like a child's tracing. I compared it to my actual signature on a job application. The difference was a bruise you couldn't ignore. That's when I started recording. I called Mama and said, I need help. The rent's behind. She said, I already sent you $3,000 this month. That's a quote. The phone saved her voice, crisp as the day. If this happened to you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. Because once you see the pattern, you can't go back to pretending. We had a family meeting. Dining room, candles lit like a set. The cross-stitched Grace hanging over a table where I never quite had a seat. I laid out the photocopies, the ledger pages, the $5,000 months, the $8,000 Christmas, the Darnell signature. These numbers don't lie, I said. My voice didn't shake. I didn't add all the words buzzing in my bones. Why would you do this to your own son? My brother laughed at the word. You ain't blood. Mama's mouth trembled, tears quick on command. How dare you accuse me, after all we've done? Siblings set their faces, practiced. You're being ungrateful. Someone said, maybe you're just confused, Dee. Deacon's wife, invited as a moral witness, murmured, let's keep this in the family. Family is supposed to be a safe place, but in that room, family was a wall. They thought I'd just disappear quietly. I didn't. Ms. Ruby, the neighbor who watched us kids play back when playing meant being tolerated if I kept the noise down, called me from her porch. Mr. Darnell, she said, I've seen what they do to you. She kept her own notes, that woman, dates, cars coming in and out, which nights Mama's voice got loud enough to float across the street. She'd seen a mobile notary come after Grandma died. She had HOA newsletters big-upping Elaine for her charitable giving, and she had her own little ledger where she wrote, Dee drove up in same old sneakers, Dee carried groceries to Ms. Elaine but left with nothing. Reggie brought me a stack of bank envelopes he'd saved from the garage cleanouts. Kayla came with a broken piggy bank heart and a willingness to testify. We sat in the basement making piles on milk crates. You got forgery, conversion, maybe wire fraud, said attorney Patrice Owens from Atlanta Legal Aid Society when I finally walked into her office, hat in hand. And that house? We're going to talk probate. Fulton County don't play about forged codicils. I straightened my shoulders for the first time in months. She slid me a glass of water. You don't deserve this treatment. I'll testify if you need me, said Ms. Ruby when I asked. For the first time in years, I felt hope. One night, after a shift that left my hands vibrating like the machines, I sat with that old iPhone and dug deeper. There was another voice memo, Grandma's voice, fragile but fierce. This house is yours, Darnell, for surviving their hate. The code is your birthday backwards. There's a letter in the safe, signed by me and notarized by Ms. Grady before she moved to Macon. If they question it, show them the signature on my driver's license. I pressed pause and put my face in my hands. I was not alone in the way folks said I was. The paper I found next changed everything. The letter, scanned by the phone back when Grandma was still learning about clouds and cameras, said plainly that she was transferring the house to me upon her passing, because she knew what the rest have in their hearts. She'd written, "You deserve a door that opens when you turn the key." I cried, not for the house, though a house is a kind of healing, but because somebody saw me and wrote it down. Share this story if you think families should protect each other. We made a plan. There's a mobile notary called Peach State Notary that will come to your front door with a stamp and a smile. Attorney Owens lined one up for Christmas morning. We pulled the deed records at the Fulton County Courthouse and matched signatures. We prepared an affidavit for Ms. Ruby and a statement from Kayla. Deacon Paul, whose faith is not performative, came by the community center to practice reading the ledger entries out loud. I believed lies because they sounded like hymns, he admitted. We sat at a folding table under a poster about free GED classes and mapped the day. I printed everything twice and labeled the tabs with sticky notes from Goodwill, the only store where a dollar still stretches. I prayed in the empty sanctuary at Mount Victory, the stained glass pooling colors around me. I told Grandma I would go in peace and leave in truth. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. What would you have done if it was you? Christmas. Morning came clear and brittle. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and hypocrisy. I stood on the welcome mat and thought, today we cut the engine. Mama blocked the tree. No gifts for you because you're black, she said. My siblings shifted. The neighbor across the street, Ms. Ruby, stood where she said she'd be, by her window, blinds open. I looked at Mama and saw her whole performance career flash. PTA meetings, HOA letters, church banquets, sympathy lunches. Bet, I said softly. I walked to the study, the paint still scuffed where Grandma used to nudge the door closed with her hip. I put in the code, my birthday backwards, and the little red light turned green like a blessing. The safe opened with that low, home metal sound. I lifted the envelope labeled, "For Darnell." I lifted the deed Grandma had prepped, her neat letters on the signature line. I stepped back into the living room. I don't accept this, Mama said, voice pitched high for the neighbors and the Lord. You don't have to, I said. It's not a gift, it's a transfer. She blinked. I read Grandma's words out loud. For surviving their hate. Everybody in the room flinched like the truth had a physical weight. Kayla made a noise like relief. My sister, the one with the Mercedes, pulled her robe tight and looked at her phone as if a text could save her from a legacy. I opened the front door and waved at the notary waiting by the curb. On cue, Attorney Owens stepped up behind her. Peach State Notary set her briefcase on the console table, under the Bless This Home sign. The pen felt heavy. Mr. Whitaker, do you understand what you're signing? She asked. I do, I said. I just want what's fair. I signed in front of my family while the neighbors watched through the window, and the paper took on the shape of my name. Faces turned pale. Mama said, You manipulated my mother. Attorney Owens lifted a brow. We have recordings, Ms. Whitaker. The mask slipped because the mask always slips when the room goes quiet enough to hear it rustle. The house breathed different after the stamp hit. What came next was the collapsing part. Mama talked fast and low, switching to that educated register. We must consider the legal ramifications of falsified notarization. Ms. Ruby knocked gently and stepped in, invited by the truth. I saw the notary come when Mrs. Whitaker was alive. I saw who left with the papers that day, too. Reggie spoke from the doorway, ball cap in hand. I hauled boxes marked estate to your trunk, Ms. Elaine, 2 weeks after the funeral. Kayla put down her phone and said, "You told me I wasn't worth the paper it would take to apply for scholarships, and I believed you. I was a child." Deacon Paul came around at the same time, breathless from walking over, and bowed his head. "We had no idea," he said. "We should have listened." I looked at my mother, at the way her fingers tightened on the edge of the table, like she could hold the narrative in place by pressure alone. "You don't get to be the victim and the thief," I said, voice still steady. When Attorney Owens called to file a police report about forgery and conversion, Mama tried to leave. A cousin who always kept his head down stepped in front of her. "No more," he said, voice small but steel. The patrol car pulled up quiet, respect in the officer's shoulders, because a churchman stood by and an old woman didn't blink. The officer took copies of the forged codicil, the bank statements, the benevolence fund transfers, and Grandma's letter. He said, "This is going to the Fulton County DA." Mama shook, then tried to plead, "Darnell, think about what this looks like for the church, for our family." I looked her in the eye. Family is supposed to look like love, not like this. The truth always comes to light. People ask about the church. Mount Victory brought me in for a conversation. The pastor's face was gray with shock, his voice soft, like he was stepping into a room where someone slept. "Son, we believed her," he said. "We had no idea." Because the lie had worn a choir robe and a hat with feathers. The church formed a committee to investigate the benevolence fund, which is a fancy way to say they looked at every line. They apologized from the pulpit, which is a hard and holy thing. Deacon Paul asked me if I would speak. I stood there where Mama had bragged, and I told them about counting coins, about the space heater, about the choice between heat and metformin. I told them about Grandma's voice memo. I told them about how people can call you family and still make you sleep outside the big circle. Has family ever betrayed you like this? Comment below if you've seen this happen. Share this to spread awareness, because somebody in your pew might be choosing between groceries and their pride. Court took months, like it always does, and justice is a slow pour. Atlanta Legal Aid Society filed on my behalf in Fulton County Probate Court. Patrice wore navy suits and a look that said, "Power isn't always loud." The judge was a woman whose mama probably taught Sunday school just like mine did, and when she looked at the signatures, the clean line of Grandma's hand next to the shaky tracing on the codicil, she sighed. "This is void," she said. The court validated the original transfer letter, which had a notary seal from before Ms. Grady left town, and recorded the title in my name. Restitution was ordered. The judge didn't let the church part slide either. She recommended strongly that the Benevolence Fund institute oversight. The DA filed charges for forgery and conversion. I didn't ask for handcuffs. I asked for accountability. Mama didn't go to jail that day, but she went home to a house that wasn't hers anymore. And sometimes that's the truest sentence. Winning didn't feel like a parade. It felt like standing in Grandma's hallway at dusk and hearing the house settle. It felt like pulling up torn carpet and finding old hardwood, the boards worn by feet I wanted to honor. It felt like calling a roofing guy who didn't charge me church prices because he remembered me from youth group when I used to set up chairs at 6 a.m. It felt like moving my mattress off milk crates and onto a bed frame somebody from Mount Victory donated after admitting they'd been fooled for years. "We should have listened," people said at the barber shop when I went in for a fade at Earl's Clippers. "Man, they really had us thinking you was the golden child in that White House." The barber shook his head, the Clippers humming honesty. Gossip turned to truth-turning, and sometimes that's the closest we get to apology in a room full of men trying to survive. I fixed the front steps. I painted the porch rail that used to squeak. I planted collards because Grandma used to say you gotta grow your own greens to remember who you are. I rented out the extra bedroom to a guy from the warehouse trying to get back on his feet after a rough patch. I set a plate on the stove on Sundays, mac and cheese, greens, a little cornbread for any neighbor who knocked. Ms. Ruby came by with pound cake and a hug that erased a decade of being invisible. Kayla started classes at the community college, with money the court ordered returned to her fund. I started volunteering at free legal workshops at the community center off Cascade, telling folks how to collect receipts, how to notice when "keep it in the family" is a cover for "keep you quiet." If you see these signs, secrecy around money, sudden changes to a will, people telling you you're confused when you know you're not, don't wait. Write it down. Tell somebody. Ask for help. People wanted to know if there was forgiveness. I told them I ain't the gatekeeper of heaven. I got a kitchen to sweep and a roof to keep from leaking. One of my brothers, the youngest, came by with a bucket and a paintbrush and didn't say much. He worked the edges and apologized with his elbows. That counts. One sister never came. The one with the Mercedes slowed down once when I was walking to the bus stop with my lunch in a brown paper bag. She looked right through me. I pulled my coat tighter. I thought about Grandma. I thought about how love had been weaponized in our house. I thought about how you can be raised white and told you deserve the world and not understand what it means to be the only black body at a table that claims to be for all. It wasn't just money. It was also dignity. It was also being told time after time that my skin made me less. And when Mama said, "No gifts for you because you're black," it was the quiet part coming out loud. Sometimes the only answer is to put the paper on the table, speak plain, and sign your name in a way that makes a room adjust its eyes. I still take the MARTA sometimes, even after I bought a used Corolla with a dented fender. The bus is where I see what's real. A woman from Mount Victory approached me once as we jostled near Lakewood Station and said, "Mr. Darnell, we had no idea. We should have listened." I told her, "You're listening now," and gave her the number for Atlanta Legal Aid. At home, I put my bottles of metformin in a row where I could see them full, not half. Heat clicked on with the thermostat like a promise kept. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned shift by shift, but sometimes it's restored all at once by the slam of a notary's stamp. Every now and then, the story chokes me like sawdust. I'll be sweeping the back room and I'll hear that phrase, "You should be grateful for what you have." Gratitude ain't the same thing as silence. Gratitude is a blessing you speak over what's true. It's what I say over the pot of greens when they steam up the window. It's what I say when Ms. Ruby knocks. It ain't what I owe to someone who used my skin as a wedge to open wallets and then snatch the bread from my table. They said I was confused, but I remembered everything. I am young, but I'm not stupid. The truth always comes to light. Sometimes I drive by Mount Victory on a Sunday morning just to watch folks spill out into sunshine, hugging and laughing, and I say a little prayer for the church, because faith is messy and humans are worse. They set up a new benevolence process with 2 signatures on every check and quarterly reports. The first time they did it, Deacon Paul read the numbers in a voice that trembled. "We learned something," he said. The second time, a woman I didn't know slipped a $20 bill in my hand and said, "For your roof." I wanted to refuse, pride barreling up, but love is love. I put it in my pocket and thought about how community can break your heart and mend it in the same month. There are nights when I sit on the front steps and look over at Ms. Ruby's window, and she waves a little wave. The porch light throws a warm circle. I can still hear Mama's words. I can still see the tree lights blinking like a pulse. I can still feel the weight of the pen. I am not celebrating destruction. I am mourning the necessity of it. I wish we could have had a Christmas where gifts were love and not leverage. I wish my mother could have looked at me and seen a son and not a story. But I learned something standing in that living room. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you're counting pennies for bread. And sometimes the only way to honor your elders is to do what they asked of you, even when it makes people whisper. Some of you are going to hear this and think, "My aunt been doing that." Some of you are going to check a ledger. Some of you are going to look at a safe with new eyes. If you're going through this, remember, you're not crazy and you're not alone. If you see these signs, sudden generosity in public, stinginess in private, stories that change depending on who's listening, papers that appear out of nowhere with spelling mistakes in names, folks telling you we'll handle it while you're buying medicine with coins, call somebody. Atlanta Legal Aid saved me. So did Ms. Ruby. So did a notary with a good pen and a church that remembered what it was about. And so did the part of me that Grandma raised with biscuits and a hand on the shoulder that said, "You are loved." I kept the letter in a frame by the door, not to taunt anybody, to remind myself that love can be written down and counted as fact. The house creaks at night, but it's a sweet sound. Kayla comes by and studies at the kitchen table under a lamp with a frayed shade I found at Goodwill. Reggie built me shelves in the study using wood that used to live as something else. Ms. Ruby says the porch looks like it did when her kids were little. I can live with modest. I can live with honest. I'm fine wearing Goodwill boots if they take me where I need to go. Dignified poverty beats wealthy deception every single time. By the end of this story, I hope you understand why I had to stand up in that church and in that living room. I had to. Because the truth isn't just a fact on paper. It's a home you can put your feet down in. It's medicine that doesn't have to be stretched. It's heat that comes on when you ask it to. It's a neighbor watching through a window who decides to tell the truth out loud. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. Has family ever betrayed you like this? What would you have done? The day the court clerk handed me the recorded title, I walked outside and the sky was a blue you could drink. I didn't whoop. I didn't dance. I went to Grandma's grave with a flower from the Slim Pickens bodega on the corner and sat for a while. I did what you asked. I said, I honored you. Wind slipped through the trees. It sounded like pages turning. The next Sunday, I went to Mount Victory and sat in the back. When the choir sang, I sang too, low and steady. I sang for all the people counting coins. I sang for all the grandmothers writing letters no one wants to see. I sang for anyone whose mama blocked the tree and told them they didn't belong in their own story. And when service ended, I hugged Deacon Paul, and I hugged the women who brought pound cake, and I hugged a little boy who looked at me with big eyes like he'd never seen a man sign his name on his own future. Share this story. Someone needs to hear it. Like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell so truth keeps finding the light.